Following up from the 2.8 livestream going over Chisa's gameplay and abilities, we have now also received full information on her kit and the effects of her signature weapon. So with being the first character to release from the next region, and more importantly our premium support for dot compositions moving forward, undoubtedly there will be a lot of players looking to pick up Chisa next version update. So with that said, I'll be breaking down Chisa's full kit alongside whether or not her signature weapon is a must pull. Then I'll be finishing it up with her overall value, and for those that are still a bit unsure if you should summon for Chisa. As always, if you are interested in more WutheringWaves content, would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe and drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Kicking this off with the fact Chisa is going to be a Havoc premium support, but as mentioned will be less of a universal support than the Shorekeeper and will be a bit more tailored for dot compositions. With that said, she is still capable of providing value to most units and also seems to be capable of dealing considerable damage. Now Chisa will have two different states known as the Scissor state and Chainsaw state. The Scissor state is going to be her default state and will allow you to deal her standard basic attack string that leads to liberation damage dealt and healing all allies. Now the basic attack string is broken up just to indicate which stage will lead to what effect, but all you'll need to focus on is spamming basic attacks during the default states can heal allies and deal a decent amount of damage. It's also worth pointing out that after either pressing a normal attack or holding dodge after a dodge counter, it can lead to stagnating enemies and also lead to skipping the first two basic attacks, which is going to be great in trying to heal allies as much as possible and allow Chisa's playstyle to be a bit more comfortable. As for the resonance skill, there will be a few different variations depending on the state Chisa is in. Since we're not in the Chainsaw state and dealing the resonance skill, it will lead to a quick burst of havoc damage with great area of effect and will provide the ability to also skip the first two basic attacks. Now with entering the Chainsaw state, Chisa will also have two separate forte gauges, and the one that allows her to enter the Chainsaw state will be the one that accumulates points of Ring of Chainsaw. A max of 100 points of Ring of Chainsaw can be held and can be accumulated through hitting a target with basic attacks and through the standard resonance skill. Additionally, casting the resonance liberation will provide 40 points towards the gauge and the intro skill will provide 20 points. Once reaching a max of 100 points, the standard resonance skill will switch into the enhanced resonance skill Serrated Loop, which will lead to nearby enemies being inflicted with Unseen Snare and allows Chisa to enter the Chainsaw state. In addition to that, if you do hold down the resonance skill Serrated Loop, you will be able to crowd control enemies and pull them together whilst dealing constant damage, which as always will be extremely valuable within various instances where you need to deal damage to multiple enemies. Now before going into the abilities behind the Chainsaw state, Unseen Snare as mentioned will be inflicted onto the target and can be inflicted through a few other ways, such as the standard resonance skill, the enhanced resonance skill Serrated Loop, and the dodge counter. Now Unseen Snare will last for 30 seconds and whenever an enemy takes damage they are inflicted with a stack of Havoc Bane, and this can be triggered every 2 seconds. As we already know, Havoc Bane can be stacked up to a max of 3 stacks, and with each stack reducing defense by 2%, which then leads to enemies having their defense reduced by a total of 6%. Though in addition to that, the Thread of Bane mechanic does kick in when targets are inflicted with Unseen Snare and further reduces defense by 18%, which ultimately leads to a total defense reduction on enemies of 24%. So with the fact Unseen Snare can be inflicted through various ways including the standard resonance skill, it does allow the full 24% defense reduction on enemies to be quite easy to achieve and would obviously enable your DPS to deal significantly more damage. Now as for the abilities tied within the Chainsaw state, the main focus would be on the Soaring Blitz basic attack string that consists of 3 different stages. Once entering the Chainsaw state, Chisa's basic attacks will switch into the enhanced Soaring Blitz basic attacks, and the sequence to follow would be pressing the normal attack once to start the combo, then hold down the normal attack to activate Soaring Blitz stage 2 and then keep holding for Soaring Blitz stage 3 to be activated automatically. Alternatively, you can press basic attack during Soaring Blitz stage 2 to activate Soaring Blitz stage 2 Discordance, essentially to shorten a combo and to perhaps dodge a fatal attack. Following up with Soaring Blitz stage 2 Discordance, you can press the basic attack to activate Soaring Blitz stage 3, but also just with stage 2, the stage 3 attack has an alternative ability known as Soaring Blitz stage 3 Fall Toe, again to probably shorten the duration or to avoid a fatal attack. Regardless, at the end of the combo with Chisa's chainsaw attacks, the final attack known as Soaring Eradication can be activated, which is going to be one of the more valuable abilities due to the attack dealing havoc damage considered as liberation damage and provides a shield to the active resonator. In addition, every point of Ring of Chainsaw that was consumed during the Soaring Blitz basic attack sequence will increase the damage multiplier of the next Soaring Eradication, which means this ability should be capable of dealing a solid burst of damage. So with that, alongside the fact Chisa again provides a shield to allies, does make this final ability of the sequence extremely valuable. In a way, it makes Chisa seem a bit similar to Brant, with being able to heal and provide a shield alongside dealing a solid burst of damage. Most likely not nearly as much damage, but that is going to be fine considering the additional support Chisa does provide. Now regarding the second forte gauge, it wouldn't be as important as the chainsaw state gauge, but it does lead to the ability to glide on Chisa's scissor blade and crowd control enemies. The second gauge will be able to hold up to a max of 100 points of live thread jetstream, which is accumulated automatically over time when not in a chainsaw state, and can also accumulate 100 points when defeating an enemy. Alongside when exiting the chainsaw state, it will also provide the full 100 points. Now with having a minimum of 10 points of live thread jetstream, Chisa will be able to activate the ability Live Thread Glide, which does consume 50 points, but fortunately you don't need the full 50 in order to use the ability. Now Live Thread Glide can be activated through various ways, such as when pressing dodge during midair following a heavy attack, or when pressing dodge following the resonant skill during midair, or when pressing dodge shortly after the final basic attack. For the most part, you'll be able to activate this ability whilst in midair and during the default state. But as for the purpose of this ability alongside gliding and dashing through the sky, enemies that are marked with the unseen snare are in fact pulled together to allow dealing damage to be much more efficient. Now whilst in the chainsaw state, this gauge does switch into the chainsaw fever gauge and logs the ability to glide. Instead, the gauge will pretty much act like a safety net for the chainsaw ability, since when Chisa goes for a period of time without dealing any damage, chainsaw fever will start to deplete, and once hitting 0, Chisa will then enter burnout and will then exit the chainsaw state. So as mentioned, it's pretty much an additional period of time Chisa is given if enemies are still spawning in or flying around before she can use her chainsaw abilities. But the gauge for the most part will be used during the scissor state and for the ability to crowd control enemies whilst gliding in the sky. Now as for the Resonant Liberation, alongside dealing havoc damage and healing allies, it will send Chisa into the Woven Myriad Convergence state for 15 seconds, which essentially increases the damage multiplier of her Soaring Blitz attack sequence and the final attack Soaring Eradication by 120%, alongside an additional 120% increase for Soaring Eradication when Ring of Chainsaw is consumed. So essentially, alongside a burst of damage from the Liberation, it will enable the chainsaw abilities to deal even more damage and would allow Chisa to be even more reliable for her DPS even as a support. Finishing this up with the intro and outro skills, the intro will deal havoc damage and as mentioned provides 20 points of Ring of Chainsaw towards the forte gauge. But also when alongside the inherent skill, both the intro and liberation will grant a 20% havoc damage bonus and healing bonus for 12 seconds, allowing Chisa to be even more reliable for her damage and healing as a support. Then with the outro skill, it will grant Resonant Thread of Closure to allies for 20 seconds, which essentially allows hits to enemies to increase max stacks of negative statuses and Electro Rage by 3 stacks for 15 seconds. Also, when inflicting a negative status or dealing negative status damage, it will grant Shred of Bane, which is the 18% defense reduction on enemies mentioned earlier. Now, if it wasn't obvious enough, this outro is going to be incredible, since with increasing the cap of all negative statuses by 3 stacks, it does firstly allow Havoc Bane to exceed 3 stacks and provide an additional 6% defense reduction, but also will allow Chisa to be the most versatile unit within negative status compositions, since she automatically replaces Aero Rover for the Aero Erosion composition and the Shorekeeper for the Spectral Frazzle composition, which really goes to show the long-term value and versatility she does ultimately hold. Now with the signature weapon, you would be able to expect it to be fantastic for Chisa, but exactly how versatile the weapon is and whether it provides that much more value over alternatives will usually be the question. Alongside a 36% crit rate bonus, the passive provides a standard 12% attack bonus. Along with when casting an intro skill or negative status, it will provide an 8% liberation damage bonus stacking up to 3 times for 15 seconds. And max stacks when resonators in a team inflict negative statuses, it will will grant a 24% all attribute damage bonus for 15 seconds. So essentially, the signature weapon won't only benefit Chisa but will benefit the entire team, considering they will be able to deal a lot more damage. But also, since it's an all attribute damage bonus, this weapon can then be used within any composition regardless of damage type or attribute type. So the weapon's value is pretty high, but considering only Broadblade users that inflict negative statuses can fully utilize it, it means currently Chisa will be the only character able to provide a 24% all attribute damage bonus the passive provides. Of course, later on, when newer negative status characters that use Broadblades do release, they will definitely be able to fully utilize the effects of this weapon, which ultimately means the weapon does have viability in the future, but it could be a while till we see another Broadblade user able to inflict negative statuses. Now with that, I do believe the weapon would definitely be worth it for Chisa, but if you aren't able to afford it, then you can use a few other Broadblades such as the Wildfire Mark, which provides a crit damage main stat and a 24% liberation damage bonus via the passive, alongside a 24% fusion damage bonus when extending the liberation damage bonus to all allies. Although it's worth noting that Chisa isn't really going to be used in fusion teams, as she will be mainly used in the area erosion and spectrofrazzle compositions. So the second part of the passive isn't really going to be utilized when equipped to Chisa unless you do slot her into a fusion composition. Alternatively, there is the Lustrous Razor that provides an attack main stat and up to a 21% liberation damage bonus via the passive, which overall is a great option when especially considering it is a standard banner weapon. But of course, the lack of crit will make building Chisa a bit more difficult. So with that, you could use either the Ages of Harvest, Verdant Summit, or Riot Zenith, or the Autumn Trace, which all do provide a crit bonus main stat to allow Chisa to be a bit easier to build. All in all, there will be some alternative options to definitely utilize, but with the fact the signature weapon provides Chisa and her allies with great value towards their DPS, alongside it being usable by future negative status resonators that also use a Broadblade, it means it will be a weapon that you should probably consider if you can afford it. Overall, Chisa is going to be a fantastic character to pick up for most players, considering I assume most players do either have access to the Spectrofrazzle or Area Erosion composition. Now it's clear Chisa will be able to provide great support to those teams and future compositions revolving around negative statuses, but the fact that she frees other characters such as the Shorekeeper and Rover will be great alone, since there will be other compositions you may want to use them in and now will be able to with Chisa taking their position. So with that, alongside the fact Chisa is also going to be quite valuable in standard compositions that don't revolve around negative statuses, considering she still heals allies, deals great damage, provides a shield to the active resonator, and reduces defense of enemies, it would still allow her to be great in most compositions. And so with that being said, unless you really can't afford to, it would be recommended to consider Chisa more than any other character within version 2.8. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Would really appreciate it if you could subscribe for more WutheringWaves content, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. Also, drop a comment down below on whether you will be pulling for Chisa alone or with her signature weapon, or will you be skipping. And yeah, hope to catch you guys later.